We've already seen Michelangelo's Mannerist sculpture in the Medici tombs. But now we're going to show you another Mannerist sculptor. He's active in the later part of the 16th century. He's generally considered a Florentine because he lived in Florence, as you can see, for many decades, and much of his work is in Florence. His name is Giovanni da Bologna, and it's not Bologna in Italy. The name is actually from a Flemish town. But he's often called Giambologna, sort of the running it all together. So we'll call him Giambologna. He's born in Flanders. He was trained in Antwerp, but he went to Italy in 1550 and stayed there. He went to Florence in 1553 and stayed until his death in 1608. And he's an excellent example of a Mannerist sculptor. He worked in marble. He worked in bronze. Some of his bronze statues are these very small scale statues, which I'm showing you an example here. They are tabletop size. As you can see, this is about 15 inches high. And this particular statue is gilded bronze. That's why it looks gold. And it's of a single female figure who has a kind of ambiguous name to it. Sometimes she's called Astronomy, and sometimes she's called Venus Urania. And as you can see, it's a nude female figure twisting around. So you have interesting views from all different sides. She's slightly elongated, the small head. And she has a celestial globe at her foot. And that's why she could be a personification of astronomy or of Venus Urania. And Venus Urania was considered to be the celestial Venus, referring to divine love. His most famous statue is this very large-scale statue, and it's called The Rape of a Sabine Woman. Your book has softened that to The Capture of a Sabine Woman. And of course, we'll tell you the story that's involved here. But when Giambologna conceived this work, he didn't give it a title. He didn't give it a subject until, after it was finished. And that idea, that ambiguity about what the subject matter should be, is, I guess we'd call it Mannerist ambiguity. The project he set himself was to take one block of marble and intertwine three figures. This is one single block of marble that he's carved with three different figures. Now, the subject that was eventually given to it, the capture or the rape of a Sabine woman, I guess my softened title of it is How the Romans Got Their Brides. It's one of those stories about the founding of Rome, the very early years of Rome. Of course, it was founded by Romulus and Remus. And the native people, who were the Sabines, would not let these new upstart people who had moved into their area marry their daughters. Well, you can't very well found a great city, that will become extremely powerful and famous without any women, because you'll only have one generation. So they need to have some wives. And what they did was give a party, invite the Sabines, and then Romulus gave the signal and everybody grabbed a woman. Well, the Sabines really weren't up to taking on the Romans in battle, but they worked at it. And they got their military training and their weapons. And some years later, they go back and they're going to take their women back. Except by that time, the women were the brides of the wives of the Romans. They had children by their husbands. They had developed an affection for their husbands, and they did not want their fathers and their brothers, the Sabines, killing their husbands. They didn't want their husbands killing their relatives. And so basically the women came and took the children, the babies, and plopped themselves down in the middle of the battlefield. Well, they're what they're fighting over. And so they have to make peace. And that's a subject that's called the reconciliation of the Romans and the Sabines. So Giambologna created these intertwined figures, and then they were named after the story of the Sabine women. We've only got one woman, and presumably then the way it's interpreted is that the figure below, the male figure with his hand upraised in horror, is one of the Sabines, and then the Roman has grabbed the woman, and it works pretty well with the title. Now, the main thing that I really want you to remember about this is the spiral pose. The fact that you have multiple viewpoints, and this is often called Serpentine Movement. It's considered to be a characteristic of many Mannerist statues, not all of them, but Giambologna uses it quite frequently. You saw it in just that single figure of astronomy or Venus Urania, that she was twisted around. So you've got an interesting viewpoint from all different sides. And the same thing's true for this statue. One way you're looking at it and you're seeing the back of the Roman and the front of the woman and the front of the Sabine, and then you can keep going around it and seeing different points of view. It's placed in the Loggia dei Lanzi, which is a loggia, an open space that is covered, and it has a roof over it, but you can walk into it. And they've arranged a lot of different sculpture underneath this sort of porch outside. And it's right across from the Palazzo Vecchio, essentially the old palace or the city hall, on the piazza of the Republic, de Repubblica. So that's a site where a lot of famous statuary is either placed there, Cellini's Perseus, for example, or quite close. Right in front of the Palazzo Vecchio, they used to have Michelangelo's David, Donatello's Judith. Those have been replaced by copies, but it's a place where you could go and see a lot of famous Renaissance statuary just in that one area. And here you see that idea of multiple viewpoints or serpentine movement, the idea that it's as though a snake is coiled and it rises up and you can sort of walk around it and look at it that way. And as you can see, interesting points of view from every point of view. Now, if you think back to Michelangelo's David, there's one point of view that most people will take the photograph from. You can walk around that and see different points of view, but there seems to be one main point of view. But with Giambologna's statues, with the capture of the Sabine woman, it's, which view is the main view? Well, it's kind of hard to say. Most of these views are interesting. So it has multiple viewpoints.